The second series of Bernice Summerfield audios is weird. I guess it's because Bernice Summerfield started as a book. Big Finish decided to continue with books for the next audio series. I couldn't find why they did this for sure. That's just my guess. But this is what the second series looks like. They didn't really do this again to this degree because the books apparently didn't sell well, although there are books associated with other series and box set all the way up to 2020 if you count the audiobook exclusive The Christmas Collection. But none of them were as integral as the ones associated with Series 2. So, how many books did they end up making overall? These. These are all of the books associated with Bernice across her many series. Now, I've gone through the work to check across Big Finish's website to get as much as I can about this, so I can say definitively that none of these are available as books now. Some of them are available as ebooks, but they are all out of physical print. Except for this one. This isn't on the website for some reason. I would just ignore this fact and move on, but this is the actual first book of Series 2, and is an anthology edited by Bernice Summerfield creator Paul Cornell. But because it's an anthology and isn't available on any form in Bernice's website, I'm skipping it. I need to skip something. Now, there is an additional problem with these books as they exist now. They are on a separate page on the Big Finish website from the audio CDs. Series 2 was intended to be books and CDs integrated, and you can't even integrate them on the website anymore. Also, the audiobook adaptations they did later are on the same page as the books, and were done in a different order than the books, so they're not on the same order on that page. Also, they didn't adapt all of them to audiobooks, so they were never going to be in the same order, and it's just incredibly frustrating to be looking at these and trying to figure out what's going on. In fact, it's so confusing, I had to go outside of Big Finish's website and go to TARDIS Wiki to figure out what Series 2 was supposed to look like. This kind of information, and this is just my opinion, I could be wrong here, please feel free to disagree with me, but it should be viewable on the website that is selling this. But, thank you, TARDIS Wiki, you were incredibly helpful in this. So with that introduction to the concept of books made by Big Finish, let's move on to this book in particular. The Doomsday Manuscript was written by Justin Richards, with book cover by Carolyn Edwards, audiobook cover by Mark Plastow, which was performed by Lisa Bowerman. The cover for the audiobook version is exceptionally bland. It does fit aesthetically with the other books that were adapted to audiobooks in this batch, so that sort of works, I guess, but the original book cover is beautiful. It looks painted, where you see the Braxiatel Collection in the background, the photo that is important to the plot, as well as other pieces that are featured in the book. Now, obviously, I listened to the audiobook version of this, and I can say Lisa Bowerman is an excellent narrator. It makes an extremely pleasant listen. Also, as a side note, the bonus feature of the audiobook at the end is Lisa Bowerman reading positive and negative reviews of all the books from the second series of Bernice Summerfield audios. And they're all very entertaining, especially the negative one for this book, which deals into the types of criticisms I avoid. I bring this up because it's supposed to just be a brief glow. Owlset and the other Goulds in this have permanently yellow eyes, mostly avoid. This story works exceptionally well as an introduction to the new world Bernice Summerfield finds herself in, where instead of Big Finish adapting random books, they are now making an ongoing continuity where the stories in this are much more relevant to each other than what you get when you just make a trilogy out of random books and you call it the Time Ring trilogy so that you can have books that are set in different times. So the best way I can think of to start this is, let's talk about the different worlds that are featured in this book. So since this book starts by literally reading a document explaining what the Braxiatel Collection is, that seems like the best place to start. The Braxiatel Collection is the academic research planetoid owned by Irving Braxiatel. The collection was briefly mentioned in a Doctor Who TV story, but Irving was created as part of the book series, at least some books. I don't know much about his creation. I mostly know him from the audio stories where he's played by Miles Richardson, who does an excellent job with the character. But within the book world, I do know that he is mostly known as the Doctor's brother. Sorry, the video seems to have become corrupted around that spot. So, as I was saying, within the book series, Irving is known as the Doctor's brother. So I'll just make a new clip for that. So anyway, within the book series, Irving is known as the Doctor's brother. The collection as shown in this series is based on the Palace of Versailles, and all the rooms are apparently replicas of the real Palace of Versailles, but there's also clearly advanced technology in the building. And the way that this technology is portrayed is interesting. If you go back and watch the first Dalek story, you see how the 1960s imagined automatic doors working, where you go up to the door and then wave over a specific spot and the door would open, which is a right idea, wrong execution type of thing that just comes across as cute in the modern sense. The Braxiatel Collection also has one of those moments. In this, your DNA is in the system to specifically allow and restrict you from specific spots within the building. But the way this is done is with small pink plastic discs that you have to carry with you. And yes, it's not just possession of the discs, it's keeping the disc tied to you so that you can't just steal someone's disc and get into areas that they're allowed but you're not. But, you know, it's your DNA? They could just scan your DNA at the doors. Like, I recognize modern times, like, people have privacy concerns, but also privacy concerns seem to have been a battle that the people lost. So, I don't know. I guess Irving's good for not putting your DNA specifically on the server, but just in this plastic disc. I'll just say, I don't believe this is how the future would handle DNA-based access, which makes it very funny. But I hear you asking, what if you lose your small pink plastic disc, like Bernice apparently does all the time? It's simple. You go see Irving's no-nonsense assistant, Miss Jones. She does not like Bernice because Bernice can't keep track of her disc, and this is such a problem that in the book, Miss Jones apparently keeps a bunch of discs in her desk ready to swap out, along with a stern look, to try and prevent her from doing it again. It's not gonna happen. You're free to try, though, Jones. Go for it. The other world of this book is the planet Kasegrad. It is a world besieged by the Fifth Axis. That is most of what you're going to get for world building with them. Just a world besieged by fascist invaders. Which isn't bad. This world won't be featured again after this, so the characterization it gets is good enough. One really good scene on this planet is there's a scene where there's just these people like in a bar, and one of the Fifth Axis people is there, and one of the people tells the piano player, quote, "Just play it," meaning the planet's anthem. And this is an act of political defiance, and it's beautiful. I will say, as an American, this feels different from the fascism of what America is going through, since our fascism is rising in a homegrown manner. It's not an invasion. So it was really weird to hear a scene where being invested in your own nation's, iconography, I don't know how best to put that, where doing that is its own act of political defiance. I don't know, it just felt weird, but kind of good, like to know that having pride in your nation can be a good thing? I don't know how else to put that. Now, I briefly mentioned them, so let's talk about the Fifth Axis, especially since they're going to go on to be a long-running antagonist in the series. I can't remember any of these specifically, and I couldn't find when Googling it briefly, but I have heard Bernice called the female Indiana Jones. And the Fifth Axis is a great homage to that concept. The Fifth Axis is an incredibly clever title for the villains who are they're just space fascists. It's a combination of a couple different names for the Nazis in World War II, since they called themselves the Third Reich and were allied with other countries in what was called the Axis powers. At least, that's what it was called in American schools. I have no idea if they got that wrong or not. But I will say the title of Fifth Axis is a nice allusion to that military conglomerate that those countries made up. But there's actually another really good homage to World War II in this, such as this book's homage to Enigma. The Enigma machine was the code machine that made it really hard to decode messages. I don't have time to go into it, so I'll just say I've linked to a couple of number file videos going into this more. It's really interesting, go watch it. But the short relevant version for this is there were lots of possible inputs that were settings for decoding messages, to the point that it was almost not worth trying to guess the input code for the day, since the code changes every day. In this book, the Fifth Axis communicates over a secure comms channel, but they know it has been hacked, so they broadcast thousands of fake communications over thousands of frequencies, where only one frequency is the real frequency. So there are lots of possible frequencies to decode, to the point it was almost not worth trying to listen to every message, since the frequency changes every day. Now, there is a small problem with that. Like, how did you make thousands of fake communications? Like, I love the concept, but it's also, like, if you think about it too hard, it does break down a little, but I love the homage. It's really good. Now, I've mentioned it a few times. It's the title of the book. You've seen it in the video title. I'm sure you're all wondering, what is of Doomsday Manuscript? Well, the story goes, on Kasegrad, one of the leaders in its past uses power in ways that killed many people and angered the gods, so the citizens overthrew him and trapped him in his tomb and then buried it and forgot where the tomb was. It's also said that the tomb was cursed, and if the tomb was uncovered, it would lead to the end of the world, since the gods would be angered again, presumably. A long time later, two archaeologists working together found the tomb and awoke the curse, and they ended up dying later, but not before they resealed the tomb, preventing the end of the world. They don't want to destroy all the knowledge they made by finding the tomb, but they also think no one should find the tomb again, so they took their notes and divided it in half, and basically to the point that each half is unusable without the other. Those two halves are the Doomsday Manuscript. Let's finally talk about the actual plot. The book structure is really simple. There's an introduction where you learn about the collection, meet Braxiatel, Miss Jones, also supporting character Adrian Wall, who is great, but we just don't have time to talk about him now. We will talk about him in the future, I promise. We also get to meet our villain, Declan Strackland, who claims to merely be an art collector who happens to be employed by the Fifth Axis, who is trying to prevent the destruction of the cultures of the planets that the Fifth Axis is destroying. And of course, we also meet Bernice and Woolsey as they are making their home on the Braxiatel Collection. They then find one of the halves of the Doomsday Manuscript as it's being stolen out of the collection, and then they have to find the other half to find what's going on with it and why it was being stolen. And when they look through the half of the manuscript they have, they find a picture in it which Bernice can see her ex-husband in it. A picture from hundreds of years ago, and her ex-husband is there looking like yesterday. So she needs to figure out what's going on there. We then transition to the first half of the book, which I like to call, "Thank you, Bernice, but your manuscript is on another planet." I actually do like this part. They're just going world to world to find the other half, and there are a few fun worlds they come across, like the retired actor who had no business acting, considering he's basically almost dead, and his assistant is trying to get him a career again, but eventually they get the other half of the manuscript and go to Kasegrad. The second half of the story takes place on Kasegrad. With Strickland seemingly dying on the journey, Bernice has to, on her own, find her way to the tomb and figure out where Jason is. She's also trying to help prevent the Fifth Axis from taking over the planet. This involves meeting with a forger named Georgia the Forger, which, great name, love it. She also finds and helps the existing but needing help resistance. We then conclude with her finding the tomb and discovering the secret of its curse, which is genuinely really clever. I recommend listening to this just for that. I'm not telling you. But then afterwards they manage to get the frequency code for the invasion, which stops the Fifth Axis, for this time at least. The book is really enjoyable. It's really a pilot that sets up things for the future while having a plot that is solved in a way that doesn't feel like what the Doctor would do. Part of this comes from the fact that it had more time, where the first series had just 2 hours to tell its story. This is a 7-hour audiobook. And with that time, this has lots of room for a really interesting plot, including things that definitely would not have made the 2-hour version, like the journey to find the second half of the manuscript. Overall, I'm not convinced that the audio drama company doing books was a great idea, but I will say this story is a great introduction to the second series of Bernice Summerfield audios. The first time I listened to these, I did the naive thing of just listening to the CDs, and then later I figured out about the audiobooks and the books, and I'll say already, this order is much better. This audiobook is the best way to join the world that will be built on for the rest of the individual CD releases of this series. But this is also a really interesting story on its own, and contains a lot of currently relevant themes. We are good to go, and I can bump into this all I want. I'm so excited. I'm not going to make any use of it, but man, I'm excited. Okay, guess the iPad says I quit. Although there are some books associated with other series. I said the word. Did you know series is not a word? The plural of series is series. I hate this. I when I was in college, when I wrote all my papers, I'd have help looking at them from my mom, and I haven't reached out to her for any of the help on scripting these. But when I finally realized series is not a word, I checked Google, was still mad, so I called my mother, and she immediately repelled at the word series. It should be a word. I'm right about this. One really good scene you get on this planet is there's a scene where there's people just like in a bar, and one of the Fifth Axis people is there, and a citizen tells the piano player, quote, "Oh, yeah, she burps at him." That's how that works.